Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, August 12th, 2026, and today we're going to be answering 3 questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last 7 days. And as we do each week on the Roundup, we take our questions from our news stories that we put out in our SMIE Consulting, all the SMIE News Fit to Share newsletter. Comes out in 2 formats, either LinkedIn newsletter at 8:30 a.m. Eastern, or potentially email if you subscribe that way at smieconsulting.org/subscribe. You can subscribe via email or get the link to the LinkedIn version of the newsletter. This newsletter has 4 main sections: a social media section that covers everything from how different social media channels are being leveraged in international education, messaging apps, AI, upcoming webinars, data reports, all those kinds of things, virtual things. And then 3 other main sections, including the U.S. Central, which covers the main news stories on upcoming legislation, executive orders, major survey results. Could be also the Solutions Central section, where you find kind of innovative ideas on how practitioners in the U.S. or institutions in the U.S. are addressing needs for international education. And then finally, a global roundup, which is a very important section that provides the perspective on international education issues and how they are being perceived in various major destination markets for international students, beyond the Big Four. You certainly get the Big Four take, but also beyond that in Europe and other areas in Southeast Asia and the Gulf, even in Africa and Latin America. So we cover all those kind of hot takes on the news stories of the week. The previous week, we bring that to you on Monday mornings. And then Wednesdays, we go more in depth to give you our kind of nuanced takes on how these kinds of topics can be and what they can mean for what we do in international education. So I want to thank everybody who has subscribed to that newsletter, because between the LinkedIn and the email version, we now have over 3,200 subscribers. So proud that so many international educators are getting our content each week through the newsletter. Those that are watching the Roundup here live on typically Wednesday afternoons at 1 p.m. Eastern, you're finding this available across our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, Facebook as well, and posted on Twitter. And then also you have an audio-only version of this available through the Apple Podcasts, as well as other major podcast providers. So thank you again for making us part of your regular international edification. Let's jump right into our first question of the day, and that is, can an internet meme provide insights on India? And in case you haven't been following this, it's really quite remarkable how this all developed from the comments of an Indian chief minister about the unemployed Indians who he considers real problems for society, and that you had a reaction from an Indian student who's been in the U.S. attending Boston University, and he created this. Within 24 hours, he had created of the comments from this minister, or chief justice. He had created a movement with more than 26 million followers, and it's quite surreal in terms of the way this has happened and the impact of it. And it started back in mid-May. There's an Indian student, as I mentioned, who recently finished a master's in public relations from Boston University. He saw that this is from an INTED blog, our good friends over at INTED, that shared the Chief Justice of India, Surya Kant, had compared unemployed young people in India to cockroaches and parasites. So the student reacted by posting a single line on X. What if all cockroaches came together? So even though the Chief Justice said later his comments were aimed at people using fake credentials, not young people in general, the explanation was too little too late. A movement had taken shape, according to the INTED article, and certainly this has been backed up by the numbers. Within 24 hours, with no budget, had AI as his only partner. He built a manifesto, logo, and website for the CJP, which he called the Cockroach Janta Party. Janta is in India, and party. Yeah, so that was all done within 24 hours, and now he has over 26 million followers on on their Instagram account. He's created this fake political party, the CJP, and the effects of this movement from when he started in mid-May to now have truly been remarkable. What happened in that time since May? We're talking less than 3 months since this happened. This mid-May to mid-June, mid-June to mid-July, mid-July to now in August. In that time, you've had a major crisis in the Ministry of Education, where the national eligibility entrance test that all students in India who complete their standard 12s exams are taking this national eligibility entrance test. It's called NEET. It was canceled due to a leak of test answers. So the repercussions were widespread. It went all the way up to a protest and a hunger strike that was initiated, not related to this, but the movement really took it moved into street protests against the government and requesting an audience when this exam test was called off. The implications are this is such a high stakes test that Indian students take to try and get into the top universities in the country. And students who score 99% don't get into some of the top choices. It's only those at the very, very cream of the crop will get in. The repercussions led to over 13 reported suicides amongst students who had taken the exam that was then canceled or voided, I should say. There were protests against the education minister, Dharmendra Pradhan. They called him morally responsible and sought his resignation. He quit at the end of July. And after they had gotten an audience with for Prime Minister Modi, who has been the authoritarian ruler of the country for many years now, and very much he was seen as needed to act and needed to be a sacrificial lamb, and the education minister was forced to resign. So, and as a result of this resignation, families of those suicide victims of the students who had taken the test and then committed suicide will be compensated, and no legal action will be taken by the government against the protesters. So truly phenomenal. And it all started as an internet meme when the CJP that the student created after being called, in his mind, the Indian youth being called cockroaches, really took hold and really brought down an education minister in a country. So it's quite remarkable. And I think our friends at INTED, as in their analysis of the piece, they certainly share that it does give us a fairly good lesson about the evolving Indian student market. And you see now students are fed up and are feeling that their government is creating systems that aren't in their favor, that aren't providing them the opportunities that they need. Economically, they might feel a little bit left behind. So, and with so few spaces available to allow them to stay in, if they're looking to stay in the country. So this is serious for India. And the line here I really appreciate from the INTED blog is, as young Indians find a political voice for their frustrations with local academic access, employability concerns, and institutional accountability, enrollment leaders around the world will be wise to pay attention. So what they're talking about are 3 different recommendations for enrollment teams looking to do a better job in the Indian market. First, it's all about building trust, and that their belief in the CJP's belief and many around that the system isn't built to support them. So how do you help build trust to reach that? And what that means is your admissions process is one of the first opportunities to demonstrate that your institution operates differently. And if you have a lot of extras and things that make the process more complicated, makes it that much harder for them to choose you. And they Instead, folks emphasize clear communication, responsive staff, transparent timelines, and a student-centered approach all produce meaningful evidence that your institution is worthy of a student's trust. So that's pretty significant. And that's not unique to India, but certainly this spelled out, given the current political landscape in the country, makes it all the more important that we focus on trust and establishing ourselves as someone who is different, who is not treating them as a number or a cash cow. Secondly, talk more about outcomes, less about prestige. And I've been shouting this from the rooftops for the last 3 or 4 years, certainly since kind of the impact of the pandemic was being felt. We had that initial bump in 21, 22, and then we've bounced back down, or we've fallen back down because of challenges with the new administration in 24, 25, and the politics involved there. But we need to be talking more about outcomes because the global economy has not fully recovered from the pandemic, and that families, particularly post-pandemic, have been more cautious in terms of where they're sending their sons and daughters, not wanting them to be someplace halfway around the world that they don't have any control over if another pandemic should break out. So there's been real concerns, and economically, families haven't recovered quite as much. So, and currencies have become devalued, like the rupee in India, significantly over the last 4 or 5 years. So it's increasingly more expensive. So the focus really needs to be on outcomes. And what that means is a percentage of students getting jobs after graduation, starting salaries, OPT, STEM OPT options, and what your institution is able to provide. So these are the kinds of things that you really need to be on the board for you as a priority in talking to the Indian audience. And finally, making well-being on campus visible and credible. Talking about about mental health, about care for the individual student, the services that your institution provides. And they talk about this in terms of just showing that you're accountable, that you are supportive, and that you can truly meet student needs across the spectrum. And that's a truly, I think, important point to remember as we go through what's next with the Indian market, because it is not monolithic, but certainly it is one that if you're going to be successful in those 3 things, trust, outcomes, and discussing student well-being, have to be at the top of the list of how you approach and message to that market. So that's a great starting point for today's discussion. We're going to move on to our second and less symptomatic of a caring country or government, and that is related to what does $100,000 mean for OPT. This is another trial balloon, perhaps, is the most diplomatically cautious way of saying it, that was floated by the Trump administration, that the Trump administration is thinking about attaching a $100,000 levy on international students' ability to work in the United States after graduation, a move that could dramatically reshape the economics of studying in American universities. So this is an article from Forbes that's addressing this new fee that the Trump administration wants to begin charging international students. It's not a policy yet. It's not been even proposed as a rule. It's just floated a trial balloon to see what that would mean. And this, like many of the fees that the Trump administration has put in place, the proposed $100,000 fee for H-1B applicants, which companies would have to pay if they wanted to hire students, that has been thrown out by the courts and probably will get appealed to the Supreme Court and likely will get struck down there. But this would be a fee that would, the way it's written right now, in terms of who pays that fee, if it's would have been similar to the H-1B one that just got struck down, that it would be the companies that want to hire these international students straight out of college, if they want to do OPT. That would be the cost that would help if the company wants to hire an international student. It's not clear in the article where the burden would lie, whether with the student or with the company. Certainly, OPT, as you know, is post coursework completion OPT, post graduation OPT is something that is a benefit that students don't have to have a job in order to receive OPT permission. They get it for a duration of time, the initial 1 year, and then if they're in a STEM program and they have a job after that, at the end of that first year, they can get an additional 2 years of permission. That in and of itself is kind of a trial period for companies that might want to hire students on a more permanent basis through the H-1B process. So right now, as it stands, it's not. The OPT is the training ground really for whether a company wants to commit long term to hiring a student for H-1B permission and then eventually green card status if they choose to stay. So this new $100,000 fee for OPT takes that step down from 1 to 3 years further earlier in the student's evolution after finishing their degree, and does not say where that doesn't really provide a lot of details yet. So the proposal is still under discussion by DHS. This would affect potentially, if it were in place this past year, 400,000 plus international students on OPT in various forms. That the proposal does say that administration officials have not determined whether students, universities, or employers would ultimately bear the cost. And obviously, universities won't have the budget. They were already complaining about the $100,000 they were going to have to pay if they wanted to bring in a faculty member direct from overseas on an H-1B. They can't. Most institutions don't have $100,000 extra laying around to hire somebody and pay that money to the government. So that is something that we're still not sure of. It's not a final policy, and it would be obviously a significant blow to recruitment if it meant either the student. I mean, most students, they wouldn't even consider doing OPT because they don't have $100,000 lying around themselves to get a job, and if there's no guarantee of the job actually existing. Just to get permission to do OPT doesn't require a job right now, but that would change the dynamic of what OPT is too. So then treat it much like CPT, where you have to have a job in order to get CPT. If this $100,000 fee gets put in place, and the companies are the one that have to pay it, that means that, and before the OPT is approved, that would mean the student would have to have a job before OPT would be granted. So maybe that's a move we're going towards, but it will certainly impact a whole lot of folks, and I think that will dry up most recruitment of international students if the fee falls on the students, even if the fee falls on the companies, unless they're really sure about that individual student. The likelihood of getting this, of seeing this OPT continue to be a vital part of our value proposition for international students will take a big hit amongst the many other things we're taking hits for. So this $100,000 fee, if it were approved and if it were held up in the courts, a lot of ifs along the way, but it would mean the death of OPT in the United States if that $100,000 fee gets attached, because the number, we would go from 400,000 international students on an approved OPT to less than 1,000 probably in the space of a couple of years once the new rule takes full effect. And if we just look at new applicants for OPT, I can't see this going through unless there was a job attached to the job would have to exist before the student would be required to pay the $100,000 if it's on them, or if the company that's hiring them is the one that has to pay it. And to pay $100,000 for OPT permission, if it's the student that has to pay it just for the hope of getting a job, that's also a risk. I don't think there are many families out there that are going to be willing to take that. They could probably get an EB-5 for that amount if that's what their real intention is. So I don't see this having long-term real chance of being seeing the light of day in terms of a law that's going to be upheld. If it does get approved or proposed as a rule and then eventually approved, I don't see that happening long term as something that's going to be viable for students and certainly for companies that are just they're trying to decide whether they want to keep someone on a more permanent basis, not going to pay $100,000 up front just for the chance that might be the case. And only in a very few fields would that even be something most companies any company would even think about. So let's move to our final question of the day, and that is, why is South Korea struggling with international students? For those that have been following the Roundup for a while, you know that the country of South Korea has been one of the kind of major innovators in terms of having a government, federal government or national government-led international education strategy that specifically ties economic needs in the market in terms of skills gaps that aren't being met by universities graduating domestic talent to specifically expand international recruitment to hopefully keep some of the international students that come in these kind of high priority fields and allow them to have work permission and have a smooth transition into the work world and into Korean society. So that has been a policy. Why did these policies come about? You can trace this back to even pre-pandemic. Some of these East Asian countries, these older Western democracies that have aging populations, that have declining birth rates, that have challenges in the workforce that aren't being met by their domestic institutions. They're not graduating enough talent in certain areas to meet the economic needs of the skills that jobs require in certain fields in the country. This is happening in Japan, it's happening in Korea, Taiwan, and other Southeast Asian countries that don't necessarily have the older populations, but are seeing the value of having a coordinated international education strategy related to students and economic policy and immigration policy that allows for folks to stay in the country and work. So Korea has seen some significant growth. They have seen numbers grow over the last 5 to 6 years from relatively small numbers under 100,000 to, I think, I'm just waiting for the article to pop on my screen. They are now looking at, I think they have over 314,000 in February 26th, the latest numbers. They originally wanted to hold 300,000 by 2027, so they're already a year ahead of that goal. A third of those international students are from Vietnam, so that's a huge market for South Korea. Another quarter come from China, and those numbers have been declining from China. They have been coming primarily initially in language programs, Korean language studies, and the balance, I should say. The rest have been in a smattering of different academic programs. So we're seeing a country that has had a huge growth in their international population in the last few years as a specific response to declining birth rates, to universities not producing enough graduates in key areas that are priorities for the government in terms of the economy. And that's something that you're seeing a real shift. That the challenge has been the universities now are producing the graduates, but the challenges are the ones that are graduating aren't being integrated well into Korean corporate culture, into Korean society, and they've identified language ability as a primary reason for that. Many of these folks will be coming and doing English language taught degrees. This is something that makes it a little bit more of a challenge. So the academic space is, in terms of preparedness for joining Korean society after graduation and then the job markets, there's been some recent attention paid to those student services in terms of the preparation that these institutions need to be making to ensure that their graduates, international graduates, are 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 ready for the demands of the Korean workspace. And there's also been challenges in Korean corporate culture that is fairly regimented, and expectations are that everyone's going to toe this line, and Korean language is an important part of that decision. That there's been some interesting transitions in terms of students. Once they start in these companies, they're not made to feel welcome, that the services that the companies are providing to help in adjustment, whether that's housing or other benefits, aren't really up to snuff in terms of what the needs are of this population. So there are certainly some gaps in terms of where these graduates from Korean universities, international graduates, are falling through the cracks, so to speak, and not. And maybe the legal process of getting the work permission is happening as it should. The challenges in the practical implementation of their adjustment to life in Korea in corporate Korea, in Korean society, is a bit more challenging, and maybe a little bit more focus needs to be made in making that transition for them a bit smoother. So that's all we have for you this week on the Roundup. I want to say thank you to all who have watched live or have caught this session on repeat on any of our social channels or through various podcast providers. It's really a blessing for me to have comments from folks I've never met when I do connect with them on LinkedIn or elsewhere. That really helps keep me going. It's my motivation to continue to provide this kind of content for you. I will be in the country until the second week of September. So next week I will be live from campus at the University of Akron. We're having our international orientation, so we'll be doing a live from that event shortly after the bulk of the international audiences. International students have come through, and we'll hopefully be feeding off that energy from that interaction with them. So we'll be checking in with you next week at live from campus at the University of Akron, and be back with you after that, the end of August. On the 26th, I'll be back with you from the home office here in Findlay, Ohio. So until next time, thanks for all your comments and suggestions, and we'll look forward to chatting with you again soon. Cheers.